Well, I'd leave that up to the states. It's a big thing, postponing an election. I think to me that really goes to the heart of what we're all about. I think postponing an election is a very tough thing. I know they're doing, because they've been in touch with us, they're doing it very carefully.
I'm Julie Pace, Washington Bureau Chief for the Associated Press. And this is Ground Game. Well, it's an election day unlike any other. The state of Ohio has closed all polls because of fears of coronavirus.
No in-person voting occur today, but rather that in-person voting occur on June 2nd. But between now and then, that absentee ballot voting be permitted.
In Florida, some polling places couldn't open this morning because volunteers didn't arrive. And it's unclear how many voters plan to venture out to cast their ballots in the midst of a global pandemic. These are indeed extraordinary times for all of us at Ground Game and the Associated Press, and we know for all of you as well. We wanted to give you a quick update about our show. As we mentioned last week, we had planned to be bringing you our show 5 days a week, talking about everything happening in the political campaign. But the rapidly developing news and our own working conditions are going to require us to be a bit more sporadic on the show. We'll keep you updated, but we please hope you do keep checking back with us throughout the week as we report out the increasing intersection between the political campaign and coronavirus. And there is so much overlap there today. This is a day when 4 big states were supposed to be voting. We're down to 3. Last night, in an extraordinary set of developments, the state of Ohio announced that they were postponing their primary because of fears of the fast-moving coronavirus. They expect that voters there will be able to cast ballots later this spring, early summer, perhaps even. But voting is still underway in Florida, in Arizona, and in Illinois. But we really have no idea what a primary contest in the middle of a pandemic will look like. We're already hearing early reports that in Palm Beach, you have volunteers and poll workers who aren't showing up. We've got reports out of Illinois that poll workers are putting pieces of blue tape on the floor 6 feet apart to keep voters from closely interacting with each other. And it's really important to note that really states and campaigns are asking people to show up at polling places despite the fact that the CDC is recommending that people avoid gatherings of more than 10 people. So this is asking people in some cases to go against the guidance of public health officials. It means we don't know who's going to turn out. We don't know how large turnout will be. And for the campaigns, that's really a problem. Campaigns have incredibly sophisticated get out the vote operations. They have targeting operations. They know, for example, that Bernie Sanders needs to get young voters to turn out at a certain level if he hopes to win. It means Joe Biden has to get moderates and older voters, African Americans, to turn out at a certain level if he hopes to win. This could really scramble some of those turnout models for the campaign and leave the ultimate outcome of these contests uncertain. One state I would flag for you today is Arizona. They have about 75% vote by mail, so they could be the least affected by what happens on the ground in Arizona actually on election day because they've been able to bank so much of the vote already. But for Biden and Sanders, this is a race that suddenly has just taken on this feel of chaos and uncertainty. It was just a couple days ago that we really thought we knew where the Democratic primary was headed. We saw Joe Biden racking up win after win in Super Tuesday states, in the states that voted last Tuesday. He was hoping for another big night tonight to really push this race out of reach for Bernie Sanders. That could still happen, but we also just don't know where the race goes from here because the next round of primaries have already been pushed back. We've seen state officials in Georgia announce postponements. We've seen Louisiana announce postponements. And it's really raising some concerns for these campaigns about how they reach voters going forward. It's raising concerns for the Joe Biden campaign about whether Bernie Sanders decides that he's going to just stay in the race indefinitely or whether he decides to drop out. And it's changed what voters are interested in. We saw this in the debate earlier this week on Sunday night, where so much of the debate was focused on coronavirus. It was focused on how these candidates would lead in the midst of a global pandemic. Some of the same debates that we've seen these Democratic candidates have for months just really didn't feel as relevant anymore. Bernie Sanders is trying to make this still a contest about a political revolution.
This is a time to move aggressively, dealing with the coronavirus crisis, to deal with the economic fallout, but it is also a time to rethink America and create a country where we care about each other rather than a nation of greed and corruption.
He's trying to push the idea of overhauling the American healthcare system, implementing a Medicare for all system. And what Joe Biden is arguing right now is, this is not the time for a revolution. We don't have the time, the space, the money to really do a huge, massive overhaul.
This is bigger than yourself. This is about America. This is about the world. This is about how we bring people together and make the kind of sacrifices we need to make to get this done.
And that choice between Bernie Sanders and his revolution and Joe Biden and the more moderate, measured approach that he's pushing, I think are really going to be crystallized for voters against the backdrop of the pandemic. It really has put, I think, into starker focus what the stakes are in a presidential election. I do think that for Biden and Sanders, it's not going to be enough for them to just criticize President Trump's handling of this moment, but they're going to really have to give voters a sense of what they would do differently and why Americans should trust them to lead their way through both a health crisis and an economic crisis. We'll, of course, keep you posted on the results of Tuesday's elections, should they all go on. That's it for this episode of Ground Game. We'll be here with you every step of the way during this extraordinary moment in American politics and American life, giving you all the news you need to know. Be sure to tell a friend about us, and please subscribe on Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. This episode of Ground Game was recorded on Tuesday morning. Some of the details of our discussion may have changed by the time you hear this. For up-to-date developments on all of your news, head over to apnews.com.
From the Westwood One Podcast Network.